So, so today's topic, or this week's topic, is a further elaboration of the idea of this peace sphere. So after our exploration of violence, we can return to the idea of peace, knowing that violence is the core problematic of peace. And recall that there are two dimensions, broad dimensions of peace. The peace concept, which we've defined as positive peace or peace with justice, the absence of all forms of violence as well as the presence of justice. And then the second dimension is the sphere of peace, which we defined as the space within which peace occurs. And in general, the sphere of peace exists within and between societies on many levels, from the local to the national to the international to the global. But we can further elaborate the space of peace or the sphere of peace as internal, as the nature of a relationship between the government or the state and the people. And this is based upon the work of Darren Acemoglu and James Robinson in their book, The Narrow Corridor, which is a very wide sweeping historical analysis. And in that analysis, they demonstrate that a balance of power between the government, the state, its institutions, and the elites that control them, and society, defined as the people, as citizens, creates what they refer to as a corridor of liberty. And the idea here is that we can understand that corridor of liberty as the sphere of peace, the corridor of peace, the space within which peace is pursued, established, maintained, etc. So our purpose is to explore that idea as the sphere of peace. And the main point of identifying the sphere of peace as a balanced structure of state, society, power relations is really to point out that engaged and informed citizens are necessary participants in the pursuit of peace and justice. That is, you and I, us, we together are essential for the pursuit of peace. Our involvement, our informed engagement is essential. Peace and justice cannot be achieved without an informed and engaged citizenry. So as noted, the sphere of peace has two levels, the level of society and what we're suggesting is the corridor of liberty. And the corridor of liberty is based upon the observation, widely confirmed, that the regulation of the social order, of the order of society, requires the impartial enactment and enforcement of the law by the state. And that in turn requires the exercise of coercive power by the state to ensure compliance to the law. Those conditions, a effective and fair Leviathan or state creates trust and makes social cooperation possible within and across societies. Hence, we begin with the idea of the coercive power of the state, or what Hobbes called the Leviathan, which we introduced earlier. The state as a coercive power is the only entity that capable of guaranteeing compliance to the law. That is, a state, a government, an effective government is required to maintain social order and thereby to have a society based upon social cooperation. And this, therefore, the social order requires that citizens enter into a contract, a social and political contract with an authoritative coercive power, the state, the Leviathan to guarantee social order. However, the power and the authority of the state, while being a necessary condition for an ordered society, and thus for peace and justice, if the state is not checked by the people, it will become despotic, it will become tyrannical, leading to domination and oppression, structural and cultural violence. So left alone, the state will be either captured by the elites that control it within the government. They will try to consolidate their own power not for the good of the people, but for their own good. Also, the state can be captured by economic, social, cultural elites that use the state to pursue their own interests. So the state left to its own devices will tend towards despotism, domination, and injustice. So the question arises, can the coercive power of the state be checked? Can we prevent despotic domination of the state, which is crucial for both justice and peace? One answer to that question is a Madisonian answer, the answer put forth by the American Federalists, in particular James Madison and Alexander Hamilton. And they argued that what can check the despotic power of the state is the design of the state itself, a constitutional architecture of checks and balances that divide power vertically among various jurisdictions of the federal system, city, county, state, federal governments. And then among individual branches, they divided power constitutionally between three branches of government, co-equal branches of government, the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. And this system of constitutional checks and balances, this architecture designed to divide power, they argued would keep the government from concentrated power and abuse of the people. And for the most part, that was a brilliant answer to the problem of despotism. However, it is not sufficient to curb the coercive power of the Leviathan. The structure itself is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for maintaining a balanced and effective government. An informed citizenry is needed to control, regulate, and condition the despotic power of the state. And that's why the state or the government was created, was instituted to secure the rights of the people, and not to secure elite power, but the rights of the people. And that power was, the power of the government to do that was derived from the consent of the governed. And the democratic empowerment of citizens, that is society, paves the way to what Acemoglu and Robinson referred to the shackled Leviathan, which is state power constrained by an informed and politically engaged citizenry society. It's on the basis of an informed and articulate public that the state, the government, serves its proper function. Without the check of the people, without the active engagement of the people and informed engagement, the state will shift towards concentrated power and will serve the interests of the powerful and not the common interests. uh, this can be further understood by thinking about what confers power on the government, and that is the state power is only is derived from the consent of the people, and therefore political legitimacy of the state enacted through its laws is contingent upon its acceptance, the acceptance of the validity of the law by citizens from within their own moral and also shared convictions and principles of justice. In order for coercive power to be just and effective, therefore it must be affirmed, agreed to, accepted by the citizenry as justifiable and hence politically legitimate. So the power of society, the power of citizens lies in their capacity to give consent to the government. And hence the power of society, of the power of the people, is a consensual form of power. It's a conception of power as a collective act grounded in mutual agreement. And it is opposed to what is referred to as the command obedience conception of power, where you have those who have control of the state. The state is an example of a command obedience relationship. It issues laws and it enforces those laws through power. But that command power, that coercive power of the state, is only legitimate based upon the consent of the people. And hence valid justification, the justification of the power of the government in terms of its coherence with justice, is the source of political legitimacy. And that grounds the legitimate power of the state. So this suggests that the power of, when that occurs, when society is mobilized and checks the state or the government, then there's a balance of power between the state and society, or the state and its citizens. And that's achieved through political legitimacy and consent. It's contingent upon an informed and active citizenry capable of engaging in justification and grounded in their moral reasoning capacities. The state and society must continually exercise sufficient and balanced capabilities relative to each other in order to maintain this balance of power, so that neither the state nor society dominates. And that creates a space, a corridor of freedom, of liberty, of justice, within which peace can be pursued. Therefore, the sphere of peace from this perspective can be understood as a balanced structure of state-society power relations. And this is depicted by this figure adopted from Acemoglu and Robinson, that the right balance between the power of the state and the power of society creates a corridor of liberty and peace. And that corridor is the site of a just and well-ordered society. Too much an imbalance between the state and the power of the state and society will take a society outside of that corridor into either despotism or anarchy, making peace and justice very difficult, if not impossible, to achieve. So that's the main idea here, is that the space of peace, the corridor of peace, is created within a society based upon the balanced power of the state and its citizens. This can be applied to the international and global level. There could potentially be, I believe there is, a international and global corridor of peace, which is also contingent upon a balanced structure of society, state-society power relations. And at this level, the power relation is enacted internationally between the power of the world order as an array of regimes of international and political institutions, and balanced by the power of global civil society, which is grounded in human rights, and as we'll see, the norms and principles of global justice. To make a long story short, the possibility of this international and global corridor of peace is denied by a dominant theory of international relations, which is called political realism, which rejects the possibility of an international society, rejects the possibility of international institutions and international moral norms and law, and argues that the relations between nation states is purely political, purely about the exercise of power and the pursuit of self-interests, not what is right or good. And from this perspective, the only possibility is a negative peace, kind of a state of Cold War between nations based upon a military balance of power. However, within realism, there are certain assumptions and assertions. Realism asserts a national right to self-determination, and that is based in sovereignty, that each nation in the world has a right to determine its own policies, its own law, its own affairs. And that the claim of that right of self-determination entails a moral responsibility upon states to not to intervene in the affairs of others. So the right to self-determination creates an international obligation of non-intervention, and that those two principles of self-determination and non-intervention really constitute the core principles of an international society of nation states. And that society is given shape by a system of international institutions and regimes and organizations, laws, treaties, conventions, various kinds of international institutions and organizations, including the United Nations, NATO, the European Union, the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, et cetera, et cetera. And it's grounded in various international law regimes, including the UN Charter, these are examples, the Paris Climate Agreement, the Biological Weapons Convention, the Geneva Convention, various human rights conventions, et cetera. So a vast array of international law has been created, and a significant array of international institutions have been created that constitutes a political and legal system of world order. However, that system, like any national government, is grounded in the rights of individuals that comprise them. It's grounded in sovereignty, and the parameters of non-intervention are grounded in human rights. Therefore, peace can only be achieved through the establishment of shared moral, legal, and political global order that guarantees the rights of all human beings. And this creates a global moral community of citizens, often referred to as a global civil society. So global citizens within this civil society are empowered by their human rights as a moral and political power, and this is parallel to the domestic society, that can balance the political power of the system of world order created by nation states. And this, one could argue, the balance of power between the world order and global civil society creates also a sphere, a corridor within which positive peace can be pursued and established on an international and global level. And this is depicted in this figure, that the balance of power between world order and global society creates the right balance would create a sphere of positive world peace, without which the pursuit of peace and justice is difficult to achieve. So, in conclusion, state political power is in a state of balance with the power of society when it achieves political legitimacy through consent. And this balance creates a corridor of liberty, justice, and peace within and between nations. And the main point of identifying this sphere in this way, and I think this is an empirically valid idea based in a deep historical analysis of political relations, is that citizens, you and I, we are essential participants in the pursuit of justice. It is our moral and political power that is necessary for the pursuit and establishment of justice. Peace and justice cannot be achieved without our involvement, and we might have, therefore, a duty, an obligation to engage politically in the pursuit of justice. So that's a summary, longer than I anticipated, but do you have any